Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. If the numbers are right, we have nearly 600 of you with us today from all over. So thank you so much for joining us for this very special event called We Didn't Arrive Here Alone, which is guest curated by Yosimar Reyes and features Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, Marcelo Hernandez Castillo, and Jose Antonio Vargas. I'm Roya Amir Soleimani. I am the artistic director and curator of PICA, which is the Portland Institute for Contemporary Art in Portland, Oregon, which is located on the stolen and unceded lands of the Chinook, Multnomah, Clackamas, Tualatin Kalapuya, and many other Indigenous peoples, both recorded and unrecorded, who have been the stewards and custodians of these lands since time immemorial. As settlers and as guests, we extend our gratitude and respect to their ancestors and elders, past, present, and emerging. So I'm here for some of the boring stuff. I'll be quick, I promise, and then we're going to turn it over to our guests of the hour. Many of you might not be familiar with PICA, but we're a multidisciplinary art organization that was founded in 1995 and presents contemporary visual art, experimental performance, and public programs with artists from around the world. My colleague Kristen Kennedy and I co-curated our current exhibition called We Got Each Other's Back by Carlos Motta, in collaboration with Heldáy de la Cruz, Julio Salgado, and Edna Vázquez, which seeks to shift the mainstream narratives around undocumented identity and experience. Carlos is here with us today and will tell you a bit more about the connection between the exhibition and the program in a moment. But before I turn things over, I just want to note a few things about today and to thank some really wonderful people who've been involved. So you might notice that we have two ASL interpreters with us, Leila McSwain Ibarra and Bilkis Rashidi, and a live captioner, Krista Segaroa. Thank you to all of these folks for helping us to provide communication access. And please use the chat bar in the live stream to let us know if you're having any trouble with these features or any other access needs that we might be able to support. Please also know that any donations towards today's event support Pueblo Unido and VAWS Workers' Rights Education Project, which are two Portland-based organizations supporting undocumented communities and migrant justice. So if you're able, please contribute. We really appreciate it. And also to note, this event will be recorded and it will stay up online for a long time. So for viewing on demand, we'll also be subtitling it in Spanish. So please share, watch again, let people know who couldn't make it today. And finally, thank yous to some very important folks, our program partners and supporters, the Cooley Gallery at Reed College, the MA in Critical Studies program at the Pacific Northwest College of Art, the Dr. Bronner's Family Foundation, and the Multnomah County Cultural Coalition, who have supported both today's program and also a publication that we're going to be putting together of some writing and art by undocumented folks, and we'll be doing that later this year. So we'll announce shortly. And then a thank you to all the PICA staff who've worked on this event, to our guest writers, Carla, Marcelo, and Jose. I've been reading your work and loving it, and I'm really thrilled that we get to have you all with us. To our fabulous guest curator and moderator, Yosimar Reyes, it's been a pleasure working with you on this program and getting to know you a bit. And Yosimar will be taking questions from the audience toward the end, just so you know, and that will be through the chat. We'll tell you more. And finally, to Carlos, Heldáy, Julio, and Edna for the privilege of working on the exhibition with you. And I'm going to turn it over to Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you, Roya, for that wonderful introduction. I am also going to keep it really short, but I did want to give you a little context in terms of how this event comes to be. A couple of years ago, I started to work on what is now a multi-channel video installation in collaboration with undocumented folks around the United States. In particular, Julio Salgado, Edna Vázquez, and Heldáy de la Cruz. Who are both subjects and co-authors, collaborators of multi-channel videos that tell their stories. The focus of the work really has to do with the ways in which the three of them have turned to art and creativity as a way to tackle some of the social and political issues that have affected their lives in the United States. This is the third event related to this project. The first one was a symposium titled Bodies at the Borders that took place at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and at the University of California, Santa Cruz in January 2020. Um, and the second one was a presentation of my own work and a monograph that was published recently. And so this will be the third and last event because it's also the closing weekend for the exhibition at PICA. I thought that it would be wonderful to be able to also shift away from the visual arts and give some space to folks that are working in writing. I had a chance to work with Yosimar in the first event that took place last year. Yosimar was a participant in one of the panel discussions, and I felt that it would be wonderful to be able to give Yosimar a kind of carte blanche and invite the people who he's been in conversation with, have inspired him, and so on. So this is really the product of Yosimar's work. And I'm very, very happy that Jose Antonio Vargas, Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, and Marcelo Hernandez Castillo have accepted to join Yosimar in this conversation. I'll be stepping away, but I really just wanted to also thank Julio Salgado, Edna Vázquez, and Heldáy de la Cruz for the really amazing opportunity to work with them and to create these collaborative portraits of themselves and their work. And lastly, Roya, Kristen, and everyone at PICA who has been working to put this event together, but also the exhibition and this really long process that has been going on for about 2 years. So Yosimar Reyes is a nationally acclaimed poet and public speaker, born in Guerrero, Mexico, and raised in Eastside San Jose. Yosimar explores the themes of migration and sexuality in his work. The Advocate named him one of the 13 LGBT Latinx changing the world, and Remezcla included Reyes on the list top 10 up and coming Latinx poets you need to know. Thank you again, Yosimar, and everyone. I'm really excited to hear you speak. Bye bye.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Yosimar Reyes, and she is no longer up and coming. She is arrived. Estoy muy emocionado. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you, Roya and Carlos, for inviting me to curate this event. And the event is titled "We Didn't Arrive Here Alone." And I purposely titled that because I feel like the folks that we're going to be in conversation with today in a way have kind of been, trailblazers and giving us like just the hope for for all of us that embody the undocumented experience. Initially when I was curating this, I was like, oh my god, I'm a little scared to invite them because they're going to be like, I'm more than just undocumented, because oftentimes as undocumented people just view us as that. But I think that one of the things that I wanted to do specifically for this event is centralize undocumented audience. I think oftentimes there is conversation around undocumented people as subjects, but we never think as undocumented people as an audience for storytelling. And I feel like for us who embody this experience, in a country that tries to eat us alive, I think it's very important for us to centralize this audience because we also do need stories that capture the essence, the magic, and the power that we do embody. And I feel like the writers today, in a way, do capture that and really give us like a glimpse into this experience. So I'm really, really excited to be in conversation with them. The way the program's going to work is we're going to have them read a little excerpt from their work, and then we're going to be in conversation, and you get to hear a little bit from them. And then you can submit your questions towards the end, and then we'll be taking audience questions to do that. Okay, joining us today, we have Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, Marcelo Hernandez Castillo, and Jose Antonio Vargas. I'm going to read their bios, and then we're going to start with them reading. First, we have Karla Cornejo Villavicencio. With the publication of her debut book, The Undocumented Americans, Karla Cornejo Villavicencio became the first undocumented finalist for the National Book Award. Her book was also named by Barack Obama as one of his favorite books of 2020 and was selected as one of the best books of the year by the New York Times, Time, NPR, and the New York Public School Library. Marcelo Hernandez Castillo is a poet, essayist, a translator, and immigration advocate. He is the author of Sensotle and the Children of the Land. As an AB 540 student, he earned his BA from Sacramento State University and was the first undocumented student to graduate from the Ellen Self Writers Program at the University of Michigan. And last, we have Jose Antonio Vargas. Jose Antonio Vargas is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, Emmy nominated filmmaker, and Tony nominated producer. A leading voice for the human rights of immigrants, he founded the nonprofit media advocacy organization, Define American, named one of the world's most innovative companies by Fast Company. In 2020, Fortune named him one of the 40 under 40 most influential people in government and politics. His best-selling memoir, Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, was published by HarperCollins in 2018. His second book, White is Not a Country, will be published in 2023. So we are super excited to have these really dope powerhouse folks. And this is like a big ticket here, okay? So I'm really, really excited to join us. Please welcome Karla Cornejo Villavicencio. Mark Carter, can you turn on your mic?
Oh God. Yeah, I was making an entrance, but I guess being muted made all the entrance I needed. So there we go. Those are my bird books. Hello.
Hi, Karla. We're gonna have, what was that?
Do I start with my reading?
Yes, we're gonna go base your reading, and then after you, Marcelo will go, and then Jose Antonio, and then we'll get into a conversation. Or you can tell us a little bit about you.
No, I don't think I do. You said everything. Okay, so I don't want to read from my book anymore. So I'm reading from a piece I wrote in the New Yorker recently. Okay. I'm a first-generation immigrant, undocumented for most of my life, then on DACA, now a permanent resident. But my real identity, the one that follows me around like a migraine, is that I am a daughter of immigrants. As such, I have some skills of my own. You pick them up young. Something we always hear about, because Americans love this shit, is that immigrant children often translate for their parents. I began doing this as a little girl because I lost my accent, dumb luck, and because I was adorable in the way that adults like, which is to say I had large, frightened eyes and a flamboyant vocabulary. As soon as doctors or teachers began talking, I felt my parents' nervous energy, and I'd either answer for them or interpret their response. It was like my little Model UN job. I was around 7. My career as a professional daughter of immigrants had begun. In my teens, I began to specialize. I became a performance artist. I accompanied my parents to places where I knew they would be discriminated against and where I could ensure that their rights would be granted. If a bank teller wasn't accepting their ID, I'd stroll in with an oversized Forever 21 blazer, red lipstick, a slicked back bun, and fresh Stan Smiths. I brought a pleather folder and make sure my handshake broke bones. Sometimes I appealed to decency, sometimes to law, sometimes to God. Sometimes I leaned back in my chair like a sexy gangster and said, "So you tell me how you want my mom to survive in this country without a bank account. You close at 4 and I have all the time in the world." Then I'd wink. It was vaudeville, but it worked. I'll read. Okay. They sent for me when I was just 5. My parents left me in Ecuador for a few years. They sent for me when I was just shy of 5 years old. I arrived at JFK Airport. My father, who seemed like a total stranger, ran up to me and kissed me, and my mother looked up and wept. I recall thinking she was pretty and being embarrassed by the attention. Getting to know one another was easy enough. My father liked to read and lecture and had a bad temper. My mother was soft-spoken around him, but funny and mean, like a drag queen, but with me. She liked Vogue. I was enrolled in a Catholic school and quickly learned English, through immersion, but also through reading Rainbow and a Franklin talking dictionary that my father bought me. It gave me a colorful vocabulary and weirdly over-enunciated diction. If I typed the right terms, it even gave me erotica. Meanwhile, I had confirmed that my parents were not Tony expats. My mother worked in a factory. For 7 days a week, sometimes in 12-hour shifts, she sewed in a heat that caught in your throat like lint, while her bosses, also immigrants, hurled racist insults at her. Some days I sat on the factory floor, making dolls with swatches of fabric, cosplaying childhood. I didn't put a lot of effort into making the dolls. I sort of screwed around with an eye on my mom at her sewing station, stiffening whenever her supervisor came by to see how fast she was working. What could I do to protect her? Well, murder, I guess. Is that enough?
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much, Carla. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have Marcelo Hernandez Castillo.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Yossi. I'll just get right into it. Just to say that, yeah, we didn't arrive here alone, but we had to cope with a lot of things on our own. And this is the end of the book, and one of the things that I found myself having to cope with alone. They found Abba blindfolded and tied up by the side of the road. He lived. That's all I have to say about it. At night, I press a flashlight to my stomach. The ring around it is like a small eclipse. It is no accident I am named after my father. I am now 6 months sober after filling in many boxes on forms with a blue pen. I want someone to take my picture and for it to feel like being touched. I believe most in my body in the precise moment of pain, not in the reflection afterward. Memories lie to me, and this is why my body could never be a map. I'm happiest locking myself in my room in the middle of the day and lying on the floor while playing Lana Del Rey as loud as my speakers will go, and pouring a little dirt from my house plants into my belly button. There's always dog shit everywhere because we never bothered to house train our 2-year-old Shih Tzu poodle mix. I can never keep up with anything in the house. He hit me, but it felt like a kiss, Lana said, and I think of the first time my father hit me as if I owed him money. I thought things would be better by now that all the family is reunited. I'm starving myself. I consider the shame of letting myself go hungry as if it's something I'm trying on, like a new sweater in the fluorescent light of a department store. Chingate pues, I hear people telling me. I go from 180 to 110 pounds in a year. This is called learned helplessness, my therapist tells me. I'm slowly depriving myself of everything that gives me pleasure. Meat, alcohol, sugar, caffeine, sex. I have isolated myself from the world and refuse to come out. I consider how much I hate myself for my hunger, how I wish to disappear into nothing like my father did just months before. Sometimes I don't realize what I am saying, say too much and lose friends, or I don't say anything for months and lose them as well. I want to know the perfect amount of myself to give to someone else. In the morning, I make myself an espresso in a stovetop metal cup and watch the coffee pour from the little fountain on the top. I open the fridge and eat a pepper. I place the seeds under my tongue. Standing alone in my kitchen, I think of the different ways I ruined my life. Maybe I was meant to be taken in the field when Ama buried the seed, pregnant with me. Only when I lie underwater do I feel as I did before my mother left for Mexico. Even though she's back, it is different. It is only in that underwater solitude that I can learn to blame someone else for the person I've become since. In that moment, I hope that rising is like baptism and that I will be washed clean. I imagine that being loved is like holding my breath underwater, temporary, something I can't hold for long. When I fell in love with my now wife, Ruby, she said she loved me too, but then she left. Though I know it will come, the feeling of rising to the surface still startles me. It's in that moment when I'm slowly starting to realize that although I still blame myself for many things that aren't my fault, I am still capable of being loved. She and I eventually got back together. I want to experience love the way I experienced drowning, never coming back to the surface, never finding relief, always just a click away from dying, which I admit is selfish because it's easier to be desired than to go on with the work of desiring. I know I can swim toward tenderness, but so many times I refuse. I refuse because I imagine that stillness is part of tenderness. And if I reach that place of tenderness, I won't know what to do with the serenity. I open the hot container of espresso, pour it into a small cup, and raise my cup to my mouth. I burn my tongue, yell, and wake up Ruby, who is sleeping in the next room, now pregnant with our child, who we will name Julian after my ama Julia. My child will know his grandparents by touch and not through a screen, or through my yelling as I push the phone to his ear. I'm always looking 10 seconds into the future, looking for the nearest door to run through, always needing to move. Ruby is in the hospital maternity ward. Ruby is wheeled away. Ruby is lying unconscious on a surgery bed with the doctor's hands inside her. No one expected a cesarean. They split her open and are taking things out and placing them in bags like shoes on a door rack. It doesn't look like they will be putting them back into her. The doctor reaches in and pulls out a small pink thing covered in blood, taking his first breath of this world. He is screaming as if he has seen the future already and knows the past. They toss him around with towels to clean him, and though milky and gray, his eyes are already open. I am probably just a blurry shape and shadow to him, softening into the empty space around me. An interchangeable thing, just like my parents were in Tijuana. I lost my vision in Tijuana. If I too am like the birds packed tightly together on a tree, and if a loud noise startles me, what would be left behind on the branches? The nurse swaddles him tight and places him in my arms while the doctor staples Ruby's abdomen back together. Mijo, mijo, can you see me? I say, and we are both shaking as if we have either just finished or are just getting ready to run.
Thank you so much. Gracias, Marcelo. Next, please welcome Jose Antonio Vargas, also known as Filipino Jose.
So wait a second. So please buy Carla's book if you haven't already. Please buy Marcelo's book if you haven't already. Danelle Peralta Padilla had this book. I'm just gonna plug every book written by an undocumented or formerly undocumented person. And I just saw that Janine Joseph is watching us, who has a fantastic book called Driving Without a License. It's actually, I'm reading it right now, Janine, actually for the second time. It's in my nightstand, so that's why I don't have it right here. I'm really honored to be a part of this, and it's just incredible that we now have a body, like the fact that there isn't one undocumented immigrant book is thrilling to me. It's just thrilling. It's incredible. And really congratulations to Carla and to Marcelo and to everybody else who has had their work published. And I think it's creating so much space for other writers and for other storytellers, and that's only good for all of us. So I just wanted to say that. And Yossi, thank you for inviting me. So I'm going to read from my book. I'm choosing to read this because of the theme of this conversation, which is we didn't arrive here alone. And then I just got the news a few weeks ago that my mother, who I haven't seen since I was 12, who I said goodbye to at an airport, basically like 27 years ago. I just got news that her petition to come to America legally was approved. And so that might mean that by the end of this year, I'm going to get to see this woman that I haven't seen for 27 years. And I don't have language for that. I don't think there is language for that. And so when I was writing my book, dealing, putting that kind of separation into language was something that I was really struggling with. And so this section is towards the end of the book. And just to give you some context, I was detained in McAllen, Texas in 2014, right? Because I'm privileged. I was only detained for like 8 hours, and then, they released me. So that's the context. And then my mother, who I haven't seen for 27 years, also lost a mother, right? When my grandmother came to America in 84, and my grandmother have seen my mom, I think 4 or 5 times in a span of 20, 20 or so years. So that's what I'm going to read. It's called Cycle of Loss. Sitting on the floor, staring at the boys in the cell, I kept thinking of their parents, the fear they must have felt knowing that they needed to do what they needed to do. I also kept thinking of my mother, wondering, as I had so many times over all these years, what she told herself as she said goodbye to me at that airport 25 years ago. Mama and I rarely talked about what happened at that airport. Sometimes I would ask about a fact here or there. What was I wearing? What was she wearing? What were her last words to me? But we never talked about how we felt, what we lost, what it means. That's the truth, as hard as it may seem to believe. Maybe it's because it's too hard for me to ask and too painful for her to remember. Maybe it's because we both know it wouldn't change anything. Maybe it's because the truth is too heavy to carry around. The truth is, I'm not the only one who lost a mother. Mama lost a mother too. Lola, my mother's mother, left the Philippines and moved to America in 1984, 3 years after I was born. Lola has seen her only daughter, my mama, no more than 5 times in 34 years. Quick visits of 2 to 3 weeks every few years. Mama is waiting in line to legally come to America. As the decades have passed, their relationship, like my relationship with Mama, is mostly transactional, measured by the American products that we ship over to the Philippines and the US dollars that we provide that Mama can't live without. We think we can bury what we've lost under all the things we can buy, when the truth is, the loss that my mother can't express to her mother is what I struggle to express to her now. The truth is, if Mama had known then what she knows now, that calling her on the phone is difficult because I can't really pretend that I know the voice on the other end of the line, that seeing her on Skype or FaceTime feels like some kind of twisted joke, exposing the reality that the technology that easily connects us has rendered the very borders that divide us even more visible. I'm not sure she would have said goodbye at that airport. On one of our rare phone calls, she said, I look at you now, the person you've become, and how can I have any regrets? I'm sure she meant it as a statement, but it sounded like a question. The truth is, there's a part of me, I'm uncertain how much, who is still in that airplane, wondering why Mama put me there.
Danger. Oh my God, I'm in my immigrant feelings right now. Thank y'all so much. Thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for, gifting the world your words and being able to capture so beautifully, the experiences that we do have. And Jose brings up the fact that right now, it's 2021, and it's really amazing to see and witness that now we have an actual body of work by authors who embody this experience. Often when I do talks, right, I think within audiences that I do speak to, a lot of undocumented students, I make sure to make the note that undocumented is not an identity, because there's nothing in your body that's undocumented. It's a social conditioning. And I think oftentimes within activism, we draw the fine line of that being a signifier and identifier. But I always think of that, like, what has that done to my own imagination, and where I've been able to view myself in the future. And I think thanks to y'all, you are all setting, like, you know, you're like that, the vision or the goal, or like, okay, there, you know, you keep pushing boundaries and boundaries. And, you know, I thank you so much for being the first of many things in the stuff that you do. I want to talk a bit, I want to start off with essays, simply because when you were all coming out or being public, I think you used came out in essays, right? Carla, you wrote an essay when you were in Harvard. Marcelo, I remember I read an essay that you wrote, Poetry as a Passport. And then Jose Antonio Vargas really came through the gates with his essay in the New York Times. Can you talk about who were you then when you were writing, and now who are you now that, you know, you have this body of work now? Any of you?
That's a big question. Does anybody want to start on that off? Carla?
Okay. I feel like I'm curious to know what Jose felt at that time, given chronologically, I think your essay came out first and had the most impact.
I don't know about that, but so I just turned 40 last week. Which is, I went on like a really weird, I had a really strange weeks leading up into that 40, because I guess since I was a kid, and when the DREAM Act was introduced in 2001, when I was a freshman in college, I've always thought of myself as like this young person, right? Undocumented youth. And I emailed, I think, all of my reporter friends, and I said, okay, from here on out, like, can you stop calling us youth? Because like 40 is just like, you know, middle age, you know? And so I'm just an adult, right? And then in the past 10 years of being public about this status, I probably have met and befriended at least 20, you know, quote unquote dreamers. And I'm only using that term because of the name of the legislation, who are now in their 40s and 50s. The generation of people, there was no vocabulary for us. There was no support. There was no, and so when I think about where I was 10 years ago, I had just turned 30, and then I was gonna do this thing, which everyone I spoke to but one person said I shouldn't do it. I think about that we may not have quote unquote immigration reform, and I'm sorry to say this, I'm just not sure we're ever really gonna have it. Where I am now is I'm not waiting for this fucking government to give me freedom anymore. Like, as someone, you know, I aged out of DACA, I'm undocumented, right? I'm in a much more mentally and emotionally freer place. And I really wonder, because mental health, which is why I'm so glad that Carla and Marcelo and so many of these books are really, you know, interrogating that interiority. I really struggled with that because I grew up, my training as a writer was always about being a journalist, which is all about facts. It's not about truth, because sometimes, you know, those are two different things, right? Sometimes. So where I am now, I think, is in this space where I'm giving myself permission to actually live my life and not live my life waiting for something that would be handed by a government. I think that's where I'm at.
I would say that I always wanted to be an essayist, and I have fought very hard to be described as an essayist. But the way that I think of myself as an essayist is different than what people think of me when they think essayist, which is like an op-ed writer who's, you know, just sort of I write about my personal life. So even when I'm not writing about my family or myself, I write in the first person. And that is an art, and it's something that I've studied. I haven't taken classes on it. I took a class on it. I took one seminar on it with Jamaica Kincaid in college, and she was very tough, and I'm saying tough to not say mean. But she, I, haven't been like formally trained, but I've worked really hard on the form. And so I think a lot of people of color, specifically women, are dismissed when they write about themselves. I had a friend recently, someone that I sort of came up with in the industry and magazines, say to me, like, it must be sad to only be known for your story, right? And I think that there's this belief that when people of color make art, we're just sort of bloodletting, and that there's no structure to that that bucket of blood, and there's no artistry to it. And so that is something that I've had to combat since I started writing when I was 15 professionally. I never wrote for like a college paper or a high school paper. I just jumped in professionally because it was one of the opportunities that I had in New York that was available to me. And I was I was very spunky, and but my sort of like second act as a writer that was not music writing was writing about immigration. And people sort of treated me like I wasn't a writer. And I just never fucked with that. I was like mind who you're talking to, because I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been doing this for 15 years. And so what has been important to me is to have built relationships with editors who treat me like a writer, and who are not just after me to spill certain aspects of my story that I've explained that I'm not going to do. I'm not going to write about my brother. I'm not going to write in detail about my parents so that they become identifiable. I'm not going to talk about gratitude. I am not going to, there's some things I'm not going to do. And I have found it very important to work with certain editors that I have a relationship with in order so that I can perfect my craft as an essayist. But I've had to be very clear with people, and been like, this is something that's going to come across as petty, but when a young woman, a young citizen, white woman writer of around my age publishes a book of essays that has no connection thematically other than this brilliant girl has some wacky opinions, she's immediately compared to Joan Didion. She's immediately compared to Rebecca Solnit, to Renata Adler, whatever. I have not been. And I think you can trace my lineage to very specific writers in the American canon. And they have instead, obviously I think people here can all, and probably empathize with this. Instead, I'm just being like thanked for my honest writing, or for my brave writing, or for being so inspiring. And so I have had to be honest with people and be like, is there a reason why we are not making it clear that my comps are certain essayists, and that my comps are certain writers that I have learned from, that I do sound like, and that I am building upon and improving upon? Like, I have made it very clear, even though I sound like an egomaniac, that I've perfected some of the things that the writers in the new journalism movement failed to do, and that I managed to do really well in my book. And why is that not talked about? It's because of my identity. And so, yeah, so I strongly identify as an essayist, but what most, what like the publishing industry and the magazine industry thinks of essayist when it's a person of color, an immigrant, a woman, they think it's a diary entry.
Yeah. Everything and 100% every time I hear Karla talk, I'm like, yep. I mean, what else do I have to add. Um, I mean, I had, I felt like the difference between me then and me now is that I had everything but my story then. And I feel like now I have, um, that all I have now is my story because I was in a far more, um, uh, a far more riskier place, status wise, when I wrote that I had DACA, and I was um, in Florida, like in a residency, and it was hot, and I didn't know, the gravity of the act that I was performing, but I just felt a need to, for once, use my story as subject matter. Um, Whereas in the past I hadn't done that before, because I feared the associations that would be made, and I feared my for my family's safety. And so yes, there are reasons also that I don't write about my brother, I don't write about my sister, I write about my parents, my great grandparents who have passed. Um, and I guess right now, um, it really hits home every time I hear like um, descriptions of these books and other kinds of books as like powerful, brave, um, like also like violent descriptions of the books as like searing and cutting and all of that. You know, I was at a reading one time with a Latinx writer who was pretty mediocre, like pretty not great. And the conversations we had around afterwards when we went for drinks was like that was kind of refreshing, like to see like mediocrity take the same uh, POC mediocrity taking the same kind of status as like when a super mediocre white dude um, comes to town and like just does nothing with their work and just raises and blows everybody off, and that seems like it's normal. It was just I don't know. It was like why can't I also invite? Um, why do I always have to be the best of everything? So I guess I'm just tired. That's the difference. I'm tired now.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. And I think in having these discussions, right? And I think for within the books, right, that for me as a reader and why I'm a fan of all of y'all's work is simply because I feel like oftentimes within narratives, and we've been telling undocumented stories for like the last 2 decades, like it's sometimes I feel like it's a wave of stuff that I just don't, I'm not interested in. And often it's simply because we are always the subject and never the agent of the story, and never allowed to tell it in the way that we want to tell it. And I think for me, one of the biggest things that I kind of been trying to fight against, right, when we started doing, when immigration work started happening, is that we would get invited to tell the story, but it was with talking points and you never got to discuss. So undocumented people in a way felt they need to fit like a model or something in order to be perceived or to kind of persuade a broader audience into liking us. But I feel like right now in 2021, I think we've already seen the way that we've done all of that and it still hasn't worked. So at this point, for me, your books have kind of giving us examples of how do we assess everything that we've been through and how do we start forming systems to take care of each other, because ultimately we can't lose ourselves in this, right? We already lost so much. um so for you, what was that thing that kept you going or push you, or made you want to tell your story in such a broad way? What was that thing that didn't that made you manifest this book or the books that you've written? the thing or the person, or, you know?
That's a good question. God, it seems like ancient history, 2011, but I remembered when I approached, I actually was going to come out in the Washington Post because that's where I made my career as a journalist mostly. It was going to be the New Yorker first. Actually, I remember calling David Remnick and telling him, because I had just profiled Mark Zuckerberg at the New Yorker for the New Yorker. And I remember calling David and telling him that I'm undocumented, you know, I'm gonna come out, I wanna write about this. And I just, you know, I was on the phone, so I couldn't see his face. And he just sounded so kind of uninterested in it. So we hung up the phone, and then I called Catherine Weymouth, who was the publisher at the Washington Post. And she was like, oh my God, definitely write it for the Washington Post. And then she called the editor, Marcus Broccoli, who used to be an editor at the Wall Street Journal, who said basically he wanted to assign a reporter to write my story. That how do you trust somebody who lied? Because that's the truth, I lied, right? To get jobs, I lied. So he wanted to assign a reporter to write my story because I couldn't be trusted to write my own story. And thankfully I said to him, no. I'm writing this myself. And then they assigned, I think, like 5 fact checkers. They called my Lola, they called my high school principal. And I was so mad during this whole process. And then a week before the essay was to be published in the Washington Post, the editor killed it, spiked it. And basically when I called him up, he says, well, I just don't know what I don't know. So thankfully, I'm friends with this guy named Peter Baker, whose wife, Susan Glasser, was my former boss. So I called Peter and I said, hey, I have this essay. Thankfully, the New York Times, you know, published it. It actually has this rare distinction of one of the, I think there was 2 articles that's been like edited, fact check at the Washington Post that ran in the New York Times. I'm saying all of this because back then, in 2011, and I remembered the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And again, I'm Filipino, right? But because of the name, they're like, okay, we should say something. Saying like my coming out was gonna hurt journalists in newsrooms because now they're gonna wonder who's undocumented and who's not. My own people, the Asian American Journalism Association, was about to release a statement, apparently, criticizing me for having committed a crime. So I'm saying all of this because back then, this idea of having agency, of being the person to tell your story was really dangerous. And I actually hold on to that danger a lot when I do my work. I'm working on this book now that is all about where do Asian, Latinx, and mixed race people fit in this foundational Black and white binary, right? It makes me so scared to write about it because I know I'm going to piss off a lot of people, especially when I talk about anti-Blackness and Asian and Latinx communities. But hey, I have a book here by Edward Nanticat, right? That Yossi and I'm sure all of us love. Create dangerously, the immigrant artists at work. So this has become like a Bible for me. So if I'm not feeling that danger, I'm working on a couple of other things. I'm working on a play and I'm working on this TV thing. And when I feel like I'm scared, that's when I know that it's worth doing. That's when I know that I have real agency, is when I feel that fear, if that makes any sense.
I forgot the question, Yossi.
What was the thing? What was the thing that kept you going and allowed you to release this book, The Undocumented Americans, or your work? What is the thing that, you know, in those moments, because it goes without saying that as undocumented people, we already given so much, and now you birthed this book and gifted it to the world.
Jesus. You know, I decided to do this because I thought I could do a good job. You know, I have something that I think a lot of children who are gifted have, which is that I refuse to do anything that I know that where I don't think I'm going to be the best at it, which means that I basically don't do most things. Like I just sort of like lie in bed and then I'll do like one thing for an hour a day. And that thing is right. And do my makeup and look beautiful. And that is bad for my partnership because I don't pull my weight around the house and don't do a lot of chores. Just being vulnerable here. But at the time, Trump won, and it was on a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric, and there were a lot of think pieces, you know, about all of this, and I thought a lot of it was corny, and I just didn't feel like I know, you know, I know Jose feels like loves James Baldwin, and at the time I was also reading a lot of James Baldwin, and I was like, oh fuck, I have to do it, you know, I have to do it because I think I could do a good job. And I did what I set out to do, and just like Marcelo, I'm fucking tired right now, and I've gone through the whole emotional roller coaster, you know, and what's kept me going, you know, I'm currently in an intensive outpatient program at the local psychiatric hospital, where I am being treated for my borderline personality disorder. And there's a gold standard treatment for it. It's a behavioral therapy called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. It sounds cultish, but you learn a lot of acronyms, and it teaches you how to respond skillfully to just emotional intensity, which I have a lot of, and a lot of people who had traumatic childhoods, especially separations from their parents, neglect from their parents. It's a set of behaviors that form as kind of as a defense to those things, that if you're privileged enough to have health insurance and not be, you know, a dark-skinned boy, you can be diagnosed as borderline. And so basically this, because otherwise it's called anger, lashing out, being toxic, you know, and you're criminalized. So essentially in this, I forgot what I was going. I want to plug DBT. I think you should all look into it. I think probably a lot of children of immigrants, a lot of immigrants probably have symptoms of it, because it's not like largely genetic. It's something that is like adaptive to traumas. And you know, that's one of the reasons why mental health is important to me. But one of the things I've learned is how to manage my strong emotions. So, you know, while I was writing this book, what kept me going was I would read news articles about immigrants and about how immigrants were being treated. And I would read the comment sections, which I never read the comment sections on pieces that I write because I don't care. But like I would read the comments because I knew they would be hateful, and I knew that they would trigger me and put me in a PTSD state. And that PTSD state is what I used while I was writing. So while I was done writing my pages, I would like take to bed with a migraine, or I would like throw up. I was throwing up every day for like weeks, and would go to the gastroenterologist and they'd be like, I don't know, you know, and it made me really sick, and I didn't handle it well. You know, it was self-medication. It was avoiding my feelings. And I'm grateful that after writing this book, I realized that there was a lot that I needed to address. And they made us do in therapy a values checklist. And I think a few months ago, there was a category called like being charitable or something, where I would have checked off every single thing, which was like, it is important to me to make sacrifices for to give of myself for other people and to sacrifice everything for other people and to live for other people. And I would have checked off every single one of those things. And what I've learned now at the other side of this, I mean, that's what kept me going. But what I've learned on the other side of this is that I want to know what it's like to live for myself and to not want to die because I want to live and not because people need me. And so what worked to motivate me for writing The Undocumented Americans is not what's going to motivate me to write the current stuff I'm writing, or what's going to help me both survive as a human or as a writer in the future.
I think to keep it short, I just wanted to say out of spite, a lot of it. Out of spite, not, because I think I've internalized the like not being good enough, and so putting something in front of myself in order to like not just be good enough, but like actually turn it into something. When I was writing my book of poems, like I never questioned like, is this going to be a book? I was like, of course it's going to be a book. It's not just going to be a book, but it's going to be a book that's going to win an award, and not just the award to publication, but like post publication awards. And when I started out with that essay in BuzzFeed in 2014, that you referenced, and I started working through essays to work out what I couldn't write in poetry. I said, yeah, this is gonna be a book, and I got an agent, and they sold it to HarperCollins, and like that doesn't mean that I don't have any kind of imposter syndrome. That doesn't mean that I don't have any kind of like self-doubt issues. But spite has like made made me want to do things that just to prove to people that I can. And then I guess what's kept me going is that my other interests that I have that are either exclusive, inclusive, or another, or like something in between, and that I'm interested in writing. Like the book isn't just about a book of separation and departures and arrivals and deportations and migrations. It's a book about architecture, celebrity, glamour, gardening, theory, invention, and a bunch of other things that I want to talk about. And those are some of the things that like people were like complaining about. They're like, well, why does it go all of the way over here and talking about like the architecture of Mexico City buildings and like the Baroque style of their buildings, and how like a developing country was shaped for facilitating modernity easier than a place like the US. And so all those asides weren't asides for me. They were what I also was interested in. And so I wanted to complicate the trajectory and the story of, the immigrant experience. Yes, part of that is in there, but it's mostly in lyrical form. It's mostly, in imagine spaces in which I talk one page about the actual border crossing, and I am writing it as if it's a ballet, or we're dancing a waltz, and there's music, and of course none of that was true, but entering imagined spaces in order to complicate and to resist though that monolithic story. So for me, what keeps me going now, I couldn't say it's like my son. I know my son will be okay. I know he has the resources that I never had. I know he's not going to be treated and neglected as I was. Um, and so, I'm trying to find what guides me now in terms of a writer. Um, it's not, actually, even though I just said that, it isn't my son, but it is also my son, because I'm writing about him, and like showing the world to him, and not necessarily because he's a citizen and I'm not, but he has delayed, he has a developmental delay in speech and language. And so we were working with a speech therapist. And so I'm thinking of his frustrations of knowing what something is and not being able to like articulate it. So I think that's what's taking up my energy right now. But the rest of it is still, I think, spite.
Thank you all so much. One of the things that, that I really want to talk about also, and in centralizing this conversation, right, I always thought this, and I was like, it's very important for me to be specific and state that I wanted to have a conversation that was for an undocumented audience, and it centralizes that. And, citizens or allies or people that are watching this, thank you so much for witnessing this. But I think for me, it's very important for us to kind of take inventory of everything that we've been through, because it's been a lot. And oftentimes we don't create spaces for us to discuss this. One of the things that I, as writers, as poets, as people that are documenting the experience, and Jose has his nonprofit, Define American, where, they're working in Hollywood and doing everything within their power to kind of shift the narratives and talk about how we speak about undocumented people. You had the Words Matter campaign and all this stuff. And I think right now, we're kind of seeing language, right? We're specifically right now with alien, non-citizen. We were back in the early 90s, we were illegal. Prop 1, Pete Wilson, Prop 187, all that language that was created to be identifiers. And I think, right, and then young people who took to the streets with coming out of the shadows, started reclaiming the word undocumented, and started saying, like, let's not call ourselves illegal. There was this huge movement to kind of get us to actually use the proper term to describe who we were. From the question that I have is, how had you taken the word undocumented and created your own definition? Or what relationship do you have to the word and the language around identifiers within the people that embody our status or this experience?
Gosh, okay. Well, first of all, I'm just really glad. I remember when I first heard about Karla's book, right? And the fact that there's a book that's a finalist for the National Book Award called The Undocumented Americans is stunning to me. Incredible and stunning. But even that, but to answer your question, we're actually starting a program at Divine American. Yosimar was our first artist in residence, which I'm always very proud about. We're starting this program specifically about how to help newsrooms, like how can we actually work within newsrooms, newspaper, radio, television, so that they can tell, more accurate, more diverse and more complex, right? Not simplistic, complex stories about immigrants. And where it always starts is language, right? And part of that language is, for example, right, I'm Filipino, right? I'm here in the Bay Area. I have 36 relatives here in the Bay Area, just in the Bay Area, Milpitas, San Jose. So out of all of the 36, out of 37, including me, I'm the only one who's undocumented, right? Everybody in the family is either a US born citizen or a naturalized citizen. And I just found out 8 of them are green card holders who could be US citizens, but have decided not to become US citizens, which I just find fascinating, right? So the language around describing how intermixed we are, the language people use is mixed status families, but for some reason that hasn't really caught on. But to me, like that mixture is what's lacking in the language, right? That you can't separate the undocumented people from people. Like the fact that I'm probably, quote unquote, the most American out of all my relatives, even though they're born here, right? Like I just find that fascinating. And then my Aunt Helen, who works at hotels, she cleans hotel. When I found out that she hasn't become a US citizen, of course, I'm like, Auntie, like, I'll pay for the process. It's like $1,000, right? For the processing fee. And then she goes, Ton, that's my nickname in Tagalog. Ton, just get me a Macy's card. Like being America to her is like, consumerism, right? She's like, just, you know, and then my other aunt, who I was like, who owns a home, who has sent two of my cousins to school, who I'm like, wait, like, why not? Why not become a citizen? And then she goes, Don, we're just here to work. They don't really want us here. Who's they? So that, like, to me, and that's what at Define American, we've been really intentional about this. We have to talk about the total 45 million immigrant population, right? Like, you can't separate all these different status from the family unit, which is what this has always been about. So to me, that is what we need to work towards, is how do we really become more inclusive and representative in the language so that people understand how interwoven these issues are and how much a part of communities we are across this country, right? So that's my take on that.
I remember, you know, the changes in the language, and you know, what can I say? I do feel, you know, very strongly that I think that, and there's it's not a culture and it's not an identity, but there are some things that undocumented people have that are in common and that we can identify in each other, and that that just, you know, that I'm just tickled by. You know, there's we you know, we people like you know, like us who have certain privileges. I'm a permanent resident now, but that's, you know, that happened a couple of months ago. You know, I spent my entire life undocumented. You know, certain privileges like education and access to certain people in media. There's still things that we share with family members, with members in our community who are undocumented, and a lot of it is hardship. And I think what the media has chosen to focus on is the hardship and the humiliations, and that's the stuff that really hurts, you know, and that makes it hard to go on and to think about when you think about your family and people you love. But when I think about us as a group, like, what do we share? How have we survived in this country? And I am sort of tickled by it. And I'm like, you know, I came to grad school at Yale because I was in college and DACA didn't exist. And my friends were getting jobs in, you know, media and stuff. And I was such a bitter bitch about it. I was like in my room alone, like listening to Fiona Apple being like, fuck all of you, you know, and like, oh, or it was probably Thunder Road, where I'm going to be like, I'm pulling out of here to win, you know. And I was like, I'm going to end up working with my dad at the restaurant, at the delis. And I needed health insurance because I so slowly started feeling my mind breaking. And I knew that I would need support. And so someone recommended joining a PhD program. And I was like, why not? And I needed to apply, and I needed to have like academic interests, which I don't have. And so I said narco trafficking, because I, you know, loved reading about the cartels. And what I discovered is that my interest in cartel leaders, like the kingpins, the drug lords, and I don't know, Yossi, if your grandma watches these novelas, but you know the soap operas that have they've done a lot of like biopics on the drug lords, Pablo Escobar, all of these things. I grew up, and I hope, you know, ICE is not watching, but I grew up with like my dad talking about Pablo Escobar and being like, listen, the reason why he was so hard to catch is because the poor people loved him. And because, like, you know, he built these schools and these soccer, blah, 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 blah. And so, you know, I would watch these with my family, like bonding time. And, you know, just, I knew a lot about the kingpins and the drug lords. And then my interest started becoming cult leaders. And I didn't have an interest in true crime. No offense to any white women here, but some of my best friends are white women. But the cult, I don't like true crime that's like funny, because I don't find murder funny, you know. But I like true crime. I like learning about cults, and that's going to be my next book. It's going to be about cults, but I'm not going to talk too much about it. But what I realized that was at the center of my interest in drug lords and kingpins, and please do not take this out of context, and my fascination with authority figures who are men, specifically undocumented men, specifically my father, is that all of these men were world makers. They had a little bit of a con man instinct about them, and they went with it. I mean, it takes a lot to be like 20 years old and be like, it's not going great here. I'm going to fucking move to another continent. And then they get a job the same fucking day they arrive. Like, I've interviewed people who come here, crossing the border, take a shower, and then end up working at the Boston market. And I'm like, how the fuck? Like, that is some, and you know, growing up, I grew up in New York, and my father would be like, that's a front, that's a front, that's a front. And I'm like, how do you know all these places are fronts? And he was just like, because it's all possible within his mind, that like, it's all like mob stuff in his mind. My father, mind you, has like, freaks out if like a library book is returned like overdue, like no crime, no criminal record. But he just decided his life was not going the way he wanted it to go. There was danger, there was financial precarity. And then he created a small society of his family in which he was the leader, and in which he made up arbitrary rules. This is what my mom did too. These arbitrary rules, including moving me to a neighborhood where there were basically no other undocumented immigrants. And so they could just like bring me up as like the princess in the tower. And they just created this world. Their house is full of antiques that look like they're like Victorian. It's insane. And it's full of glass birds. And that's their little society. And so many undocumented men that I love and that drive me fucking crazy have this charisma. They could sell you like the air you breathe. And that's what makes them like survive. And it doesn't necessarily lead to peace or to happiness or to good mental health, but it helps them survive. And I think I admire that world making capacity. And I think I have that, you know, because I don't take no for an answer. And if the world and things are going a certain way that hurts me or that's hurting the people I love, like I will bend the world into the shape that I need it to be to protect the people that I love. And I think that's something many people share. But I mean, just the fact of like crossing mountains and like taking planes and crossing rivers to start a new fucking life when you're a kid. I mean, that world making ability, I think that's like a quintessentially American thing in this country. And that's the bootstraps people are jealous of us for having.
Yeah. I'm always team fan Karla all the way. Because like, what do I say after that? I mean, also because like we've had, Karla, you and I have had like conversations together multiple times now, and every time I'm like, there's like another thing. Like I used to be obsessed with narco corrido songs and culture. My like favorite people were Jesse Morales, who was like hot as hell, Chalino, El Halcón, El As de la Sierra, Jorge Gamboa, El Gavilancillo. And I was like 12 years old and like would sneak into Vilas with my cousin who was older, and you know we'd had like our hats being chalinadas, you know, to the side. It was glorious. It was so glamorous, and I think there was an obsession with that, and those obsessions that I've had have translated over to yeah, who I see are people in power. And for me, those obsessions kind of turned into small projects. And when those obsessions started turning into language, then I think that's when I became a little bit more aware of not only like the language around how I saw myself, but this obsession over what to call us felt so prescient because that felt like a step towards validation. That if I had a name, if I had a category, um, that it would come with all of the benefits that we could collectively imbue that that classification. And so I guess I wanted to come across something, and I think there's like this like inner fighting with like what Latinidad means, and like you know, because it's so varied in this I can't think of the word. But like undocumented issues aren't just issues of Latinidad. Undocumented issues are Black issues, are disability issues, you know, are classist issues, um, are indigenous issues. So for me, you know, we're just barely scratching the surface as to um, how to project outwards from defining ourselves. And like Yossi said, you know, I'm a big fan of Yossi's attitude towards you know, that being undocumented is not an identity because there's nothing about you that marks you as undocumented, and running with undocu joy, and running with joy to also complicate those stories. Because even, let's say, even if we don't have the language for it yet, we might be able to have the experience, and we might not know what to call it, but at least we know what to do about it.
Yeah, definitely. I know. I think for me, one of the biggest things is that oftentimes when I would tell people that I was undocumented, it was like a collective sigh, like, oh, and I was like, and so that's when I would be like, that's why people invite me to events. That's why I put undocumented socialite on my Instagram, because I felt that people invited me to the events just because I was undocumented. And if there's an open bar, I'm coming. So what's good? Um, but I'm gonna ask this question and then we can open up for questions. You have questions, feel free to type them. And we'll be taking questions. One of my questions that I want to talk about, and why I decided to title the event "We Didn't Arrive Here Alone," is support. And I think Jose Antonio Vargas has been someone that's been instrumental to my life, and someone that I guess it's trauma bonding, Jose. uh, we created a brotherhood and a sisterhood, because when I met him, um I was my life was hard. It was very difficult. You know, I lived in Eastside San Jose in an apartment complex. My street full of undocumented people. I grew up surrounded by undocumented people. My grandma had a soup kitchen. She used to feed day laborers. Like, but I don't know. And I hated that. I remember I always grew up hating that environment because I always thought to myself, there has to be another possibility. My grandma raised me recycling bottles and cans. So I was like, there has to be something more. But I didn't see it. There, where? And so I think when I met Jose Antonio Vargas, it was that shift of like, whoa, he grew up in Mountain View, not too far from me, but his life is different. He's able to build so much. And yes, it's been very difficult for him to build these things. But I think for me, him reaching out, and I remember he went to pick me up at my house and in the hood. And on the drive there, he told me, like, you shouldn't be afraid of success, because you have more stories to tell than just this where you are. And I think, what is support for another undocumented? And I know, Karla, too, in your book, you describe how you intervene in the lives of the subjects or the people that you're talking about, right? What is that? What does support mean to you? And what does that look like now that you're kind of viewed as, this figure? It's specifically for other undocumented people, and specifically the undocumented people that are watching us right now. Support.
Okay, maybe I'll start. Yossi, that was too kind. We were texting the other day because my sister, who I haven't seen, for 27 years, who's now almost 30, called me up, and she's really struggling with something in the Philippines. And at the end of the call, she said, I wish you could be here. I wish I had an older brother here. And I was like, fuck. And I was texting Yossi. I was like, man, I hope that love that I can't show this young woman. When she was a kid, I dropped her. She was the first baby I ever dropped. And I've always said, oh, fuck, did I So I was telling Yossi that I hope that whatever love I can't tangibly show my sister, I've been able to show Yossi and all the other, young people that I mentor. I'm a firm believer in mentorship. I actually think for me, it's better than any degree. It's better than any paper I've ever been given. I would not have had a career as a journalist if I wasn't mentored. It was really interesting because when I got to the Post in 2003, all these Black women just kind of, I think they were like, oh my God, this kid is lost. He thinks success is trying to be like the white man. And so let's save him. And so I was like saved by these like gang of Black women at the Washington Post. I'm a firm believer that if we're going to survive what we have to survive, we need to carry everybody with us. So wherever I am, like I carry everyone who's ever loved me. I carry everyone who's ever said yes to me when I was saying no to myself. That's my religion, I think. And so, Ava DuVernay has this great line where she says, if what you're doing is just for yourself, then you're not dreaming big enough. Right? I think we all have to dream as much as possible, although, I'm so grateful that Karla and Marcelo talk about mental health in the way you do and that write about it the way you do, because I don't do that as well as I should, because I still really struggle with it. And as you were talking, by the way, both of you, I was thinking about how the undocumented Asian experience is maybe a little different because of, look, like what do Asian people have in common outside of noodles and rice? We don't even talk the same language. Like Koreans, Vietnamese, Filipinos, Chinese, like, that's like a very, so many of us, there's this shame and there's this guilt and there's this unspoken bitterness that we don't want to talk about. And for me, being right now, supporting undocumented Asian people of all ages has actually been very healing for me, because that's something that I bonded with them about like that lack of language, that shared language that we're just developing now. Yeah.
For me, it's trying to get it into people's heads that this whole thing that we're doing, this whole thing that, this enterprise that we are all part of, isn't a pie, so that like more of it for you means less of it for me, and trying to undo this myth of scarcity that only some people can succeed because there's only room for that. And that's that is a violent characteristic of white supremacy, of championing only those who are palatable for their fragility. Um, which is why somebody said at the end of my book, like, well, it was good, but like I it didn't like end on like a good note. I'm like, because it doesn't. I'm glad you felt uncomfortable reading my book. And so in terms of support, I guess I would like to like just separate that, because the kind of support that allies, that white people, that citizens can give is a different kind of support that I give, other undocumented folks. And really on that side, for allies who have resources, cold hard cash. That's cold hard cash. Um, there's organizations that really need it, um, and so on the other side, there are things that only people who have gone through what we have gone through understand, and it feels just almost cathartic to be able to say something and it be reciprocated with the exact kind of answer and further follow-ups that lead me to believe that I'm not alone in it. So that is part of, I guess, my mentorship, and not just mentorship, but friendship, and trying to break my own barriers of isolating myself. um, my younger brother has been in ICE detention for about a month. He got picked up days before the inauguration, and he's still there. And even for us, who know technology, who know how to work the system and everything, it took us a couple days just to be able to figure out how to get his commissary and how to set up video chats and how to set up. He said there's people in there that have been in there for years that have not been able to make a single phone call because they don't know how to work the tablets that you have to use to set up an account through some shit called Get Me Out, and like and have somebody else put money, but not through Western Union. But it's like impossible. Um, and so for me, there's just different kinds of support that mean different things, um, uh, that have a different kind of impact. There's support that I can give to writers, and I want to know which ways I am of most use. I'm not, the kind of activist that is on the street so much as it is through what I write that I feel like makes the most impact. Um, but in small moments like this intersection that I find myself with my brother right now, and the people around him, finding finding out ways how he, knowing, being like a computer, being computer literate, can like help a few people around him just to simply make a call.
Yeah, I just want to validate everything Marcelo said. I don't really have anything to add.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you also. It's definitely very important. I think a lot of people, and that's what we realize right now, amidst this pandemic and the coronavirus, and being well aware that in the undocumented communities has been impacted disproportionately, and access to resources right now. And oftentimes, you know, we're getting praised as essential workers, but not necessarily getting the support to keep moving. Is definitely something to be aware of. And people that, oftentimes, right, when I do my talks, people always ask me like, what can I do to help? And there's definitely organizations, and there's definitely people. And I think, Marcelo, you make a strong point in supporting with that. If you're not aware, DACA application is $495 every 2 years, and most undocumented people, that's their savings that goes into that. So if you do support in that way, that's a huge help. I'm gonna take a couple of audience questions, and then I know we're running on time, but I want to take some of these questions. I'm just gonna read some of them, and you feel free to pick whatever speaks to you. And we'll do that. As undocumented writers, how do we stay away from the white gaze? I call it the citizen gaze too, because they be doing that. Are there loved ones, community you want to shout out that bring you joy, who might be watching? Comment that I often find is the deep-seated concern for aging parents. Are there organizations or folks that are addressing specifically aging undocumented people? And I think this is one good one, simply by my grandma. I make a point to talk about that because they don't have the luxury of waiting for an immigration reform, right? And oftentimes they're the most hopeful. And then let's see, what is your relationship with work academics are producing about undocumented folks? Did I read them too much? There was a lot.
I forgot all of them.
Yeah.
Okay, one of them is okay, let's start with the understanding of writing about undocumented elders, or like that vision, right? Because it's a very, Karla, in your book, you talk a lot about how like the movement has been very youth-centered. And in your book, you didn't want to do that, right? You wanted to focus on other folks that oftentimes we don't talk about. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that and what it was the process of working with those subjects?
I mean, it was easy. It was just like working with anyone. I just made them my focus. In terms of resources, I mean, yeah, I think it's something that a lot of children of immigrants worry about, which is how are we going to take care of our parents, how are we going to retire them, and all of that. I wrote at length about that in the New Yorker article that I published last month. I think I'm not the best person to ask about like resources, but what I have found has had a direct impact on a lot of people during the pandemic is aid, and people who have had organizations that are truly grassroots, that are not like national organizations. If you think of the first two national organizations that come to mind when you think of immigrant stuff, I don't mean them. I mean like truly grassroots in the community, in small neighborhoods. Those are the people who are checking in on people when they live alone, they live in one bedroom, and they get COVID. And they need people to drop off a thermometer, they need people to drop off groceries, who are going to, like, those are the people who are doing that kind of work. And so that's what I found. I have tried to do some of that on my own, but I don't have the experience, I don't have the time. There are some people who are undocumented that I've met through my research who have gotten COVID and who have had to miss out on months worth of, I mean, you could, like, it's the difference between like, I mean, you get COVID and then you're evicted and then you lose everything and then you're homeless. Like it's like immediate impact. Like people need like a check to make the rent while they recuperate from COVID. They need groceries of things like that are palatable to them because they've lost their sense of taste and smell, And so mutual aid societies and like very grassroots organizations that are run by like people from that community, that are run like Latinx people running for Latinx immigrants, Asian, leadership for like, they know their communities the best. They know their communities the best. And so like there's like Black immigrant organizations for Black immigrants. Like they know their communities the best. They know there has to be a cultural there has to be a level of trust. There has to be a level of intimacy. The older people, as you know, are not people, they're people that can trust too easily. And they're also people that can be taken advantage of. And so that's what I have found. Right now, it's people boots on the ground, dropping off groceries, calling up like individual rich people and like making sure rent is paid for the next month. That's what I found is useful right now. I don't really know about more long-term things.
Let's talk about, let me go back to the questions. How are you in what way, or are you engaging in specifically in academic work that discusses undocumented subjects? Because I know, this is a big thing that's happening, it's a big thing that's happening, and we're discussing it. Even now throughout California, we have a lot of undocumented resource centers that are popping up. We have classes that talk about undocumented students. Like there's a huge kind of information. And how are you engaging, if you are engaging with that kind of academic work?
I just started kind of looking at scholars who are studying the undocumented experience and approaching it through a policy perspective and thinking about documentation and the carceral system, and so that's been interesting. There's a scholar named Francisco Villegas out in Michigan who has like shared his syllabus with me, and I wouldn't put it out of the question that in the next 10 or so years that there might be a national conference and an area of study, particularly that incorporates American culture, that incorporates policy, that incorporates public policy, health and public services, literature, and so on. Because again, this isn't just focused on the arts and humanities. This branches out so much more.
Jose?
Is there another question, or should I answer that one, Yossi?
The other question is, within your writing, how do you move away from
the white gaze?
Or yeah.
Well, I went to Toni Morrison University. I don't actually have a degree, but I think I've like studied everything there is to study. So I'm a really big believer in that, like in terms of how do we make sure, I mean, even that term citizen gaze is interesting, Yossi, right? Because I remember I did this thing with Alicia Garza a few years ago, and she said something that I really can't stop thinking about. Alicia Garza, who has a really good book called The Purposes of Power, one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I was interviewing her for this thing, and she said, the Black Lives Matter movement is about citizenship. It's not citizenship like papers, but citizenship as dignity, right? That the reality is, Black people in this country, even though they're citizens and have been here for generations, are still fighting for full and equal citizenship, right? And I guess for me, this is what I'm kind of exploring in this next book that I'm writing, that I'm so excited about, because it's kind of like, I know how to do this, right? In terms of my training as a journalist, is in many ways, I actually think what's so exceptional about America are Black people. I find a lot of freedom kind of understanding. I've been recently rereading a lot of like books about the Reconstruction, and this idea that we as immigrants in this country, like children of immigrants who have a birthright citizenship, right? Like the 14th Amendment was won because of what Black people fought for, right? Like the direct link between 45 million immigrants in this country out of the 1965 Immigration Act, right, is because of the civil rights movement, and because of what a lot of freedom fighters and Black people have been fighting for. So for me, in many ways, the gaze that I write under is, I think, probably the experience of African Americans in this country. This book that I'm working on now, I actually start with Nicole Hannah-Jones and the 1619 Project, and how that reframing is in many ways foundational in kind of the understanding of America, fully knowing, of course, that, you know, like Filipinos got here in like the 15th, you know, actually the 16th century, right? And yet that's not part of the history, right? Like the history starts at 1776. And now that Nicole is there to say, wait, 1619, and then what about all those other people? Part of the research that I'm working on now is apparently Ulysses Grant in his memoirs said that the Civil War happened because of what this country did to Mexico, that was payback, which I just find, it just kind of blew my mind when I kind of started investigating that and reading that. So for me, it's not about, I try not to really, in many ways, put that white gaze aside and think about it from the perspective of Black people who have been fighting against it from the very beginning, right? So that's kind of that's how I'm centering kind of my work, especially in this next thing that I'm working on.
I want to respond to those two questions, and I think they're connected somewhat. I don't really fuck with academic writing, and like my partner's a professor, and I basically have my PhD, and a couple of my advisors that I really love are academics, and the thing, what I think is this is thinking out loud because I'm just really starting my career in writing books and writing about immigration, right? I think once you professionalize to such a degree, your motivations for writing about things change. And so if you're writing for tenure, which is what you want, unless you want to be an adjunct forever, which you don't, because you don't want to be paid like shit and not have health insurance forever, are you really going to be motivated to write really radical shit? And are you really going to be, you're going to be taking the temperature of your audience before you speak. You're going to be taking the temperature of like what else is going to publish the season that you publish when you publish. You're going to be looking at a lot of other things once you're doing this. I've had a complicated relationship with people in Latinx studies and in migration studies because they were not entirely welcoming to my book at the beginning, because I said things that we didn't really want to talk about. And I've indicted a lot of disciplines in terms of why the Latinx canon has dragged behind so much when compared to other immigrant groups' canons in English in the United States. And part of it is that there is such a marriage between Hollywood and the publishing industry, and academia has fully supported that marriage, so that it all seems like one long commercial where things haven't really changed from representation of Latinx people from like the 1940s. And so it's difficult to have that conversation because you think that after, Marcelo and I both released our books during the pandemic, our books were both like pretty experimental, pretty different from what immigrant literature is, like capital L literature is supposed to sound like. And we both fought really hard to be considered literature and not sociological texts. And the stuff that Yossi, that's coming out next year, there's a lot of the same old. And the stuff that's coming out television is the same old. And if you look at, as I know, the dissertations and the projects that people are coming into academia with, a lot of it is just a complete fixation on the border. Undocumented immigration equals like the Mexican border. There is no discussion of Black immigrants. There's no discussion of Asian immigrants. There's no discussion of like why elderly Asian people have the highest suicide rates in New York. Like there's just no imagination. And I think if you're working towards tenure, where's the motivation to have imagination? I also think that there's a belief we have now that this is different. You know, back when I was applying to colleges, like it was like so complicated to be undocumented and getting accepted into college, and there weren't like classes on like immigrant literature, really. You know, that's changed. But what hasn't changed is that like there is this belief that if you are a professor of color, you are automatically a fantastic mentor to students of color. And that's not necessarily true. And we have to just be open about that fact. Like it's just not necessarily true. A good teacher is a good teacher. And I've had a lot of asshole teachers who have been Latinx and who have not liked me for reasons that are political. And I've had a lot of fantastic teachers who have been Latinx, including, Glenda Carpio at Harvard, who I believe was the first Latina tenured at Harvard. And I think that we should think about investing in undocumented youth, not just in terms of financial aid, which is what it's been equated with, but also in terms of mental health, in terms of like how many resources are universities willing to set aside for mental health resources for immigrant and for children of immigrants and for undocumented youth, where you know that the people treating them are not just going to give them antipsychotics so they don't kill themselves on their watch, and actually give them trauma-informed treatment. Because you really wanted those like sad college entrance essays in order to accept them. But once they're there, what are you going to do when their grades are dropping? Offer tutoring or offer them antipsychotics? No, what they need is like actual honest conversations with like people. And all I'm seeing is just glossy PR stuff, hiring more people of color, regardless of what their mentorship background is. And it's hard to mentor like students of color and students who are undocumented. A lot of them have mental health issues. You need to know how to talk to them. You need to know how to relate to them. Are they looking for that? No, because they're after tenure. You know, like I've been through all these places. Like I was not talked to by a therapist at Yale about being undocumented, but I was cycled through like 6 different kinds of antipsychotics. And I know that's happening to other kids. So like when schools are like, here are our numbers and here's our like UndocuJoy office, like, you know, that's how I feel about academia and undocumented stuff. It's like actually invest where there needs to be an investment.
I know we're coming close on time, so porque ya, you know, we got into it. Marcelo, is there anything you want to contribute before we wrap up o algo? No sé. Estás mute.
Just want to say thank you for opening up the space for dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely this is definitely something that's, you know, there should be more of, specifically because I think we covered a lot of topics and this is great. I think it's beautiful to just be in a space and, you know, we're not out here telling you what deferred action is. But yeah, I think everybody, thank you so much for joining us. You can definitely buy the books, purchase the books. Jose is holding out all the books. This should be in your library. These are the books you want. For the people that are wondering, like, what can I do to help the undocumented community? I get asked that all the time. Girl, pay for somebody's DACA fee, buy us flan when we're sad, date us, marry us, put on your Tinder, I'm only dating undocumented people. because that's what we need. Okay, that is something tangible you should be doing. And for if you're wondering, I am definitely available. Jose is definitely available. Don't be intimidated by anything you heard today. We're gonna deal with it. But just shooting my shot. It's Valentine's. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless America. Que pasen bonita noche.